The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Megan Cox, and I'm the Event Marketing Manager at Keranos. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Untapped Potential in Your Branch Network, hosted by Andrew Hovet and Steve Schaefer. As the industry's leading provider of data, analytics, and technologies, we are here to help you better attract, retain, and grow more profitable customer relationships for your financial institution. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send the recording via email to all of you post-webinar. Okay, Andrew, let's begin.
Hey, good morning. I guess for some of you, actually just tipping into this afternoon. Great to be here. Want to start by a quick introduction. My name is Andrew Hovet. I lead our distribution and sales performance practice here at Keranos. Which is a mix of, my job is really a mix of leading kind of traditional kind of consulting projects for banks, as well as a series of data and analytic platforms that banks can use to drive their kind of sales and branch performance, including some of the goaling analytics that we're going to talk about today. Love to highlight the fact that my career has been a mix of consulting and banking. So I've actually sat in the seat, and many of you are sitting in today trying to figure out how the heck do I go about setting appropriate branch sales performance goals in order to maximize the value and get the most out of the network. And so really looking forward to this conversation, and also wanted to give my partner in crime, Steve Schaefer, an opportunity to introduce themselves.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Hello, everyone. So Steve Schaefer, I joined Keranos a few months ago. Like Andrew, I was a practitioner, for the last 17 years with a regional bank. I've worked at a small, 100-person bank. I've worked at a very large, 80,000-person bank. For the majority of my career over those 17 years, I was doing goals and allocations of those goals for our branch network. Super happy to be back with my people here. So I've gone through the goal cycle. I've shaken hands, kissed the babies, went to all the partners, got everything going. I'm really looking forward to the conversation and what we can talk about today. So Andrew, thanks so much. Back to you.
Excellent. Well, let's just as a little bit of an intro, not to steal all the thunder on the first page, but to give you guys a quick understanding of what we're going to talk about today. If you think about the environment we're in today, in a kind of probably a sustained kind of higher for longer rate environment, it's more important than ever for banks to be able to grow their customer base, grow more of those kind of core checking customers for those low-cost deposits, those good, stable funding mechanisms, as well as maximize the value of the relationships that they already have on board within the bank. And how do I get more kind of relationship depth with my existing customer base? As some of the headwinds within the industry, reduced fee income, and kind of competition from both kind of some of the mega banks would seem to be kind of scooping up more than their fair share, as well as on the other side, some of the fintech and digital banks who are kind of sniping in our profit pools, trying to get the most out of our branch network and our customer base is really important. And so that's the idea behind this webinar, is to really think about how do I maximize the value? How do I tap into that underappreciated opportunity within my network? I'm going to start things with a quick survey. So I'll flip the page, and Megan will take control, and we'll really straightforward first question. We wanted to just think a lot of things changed since the pandemic. The pandemic changed a lot of things. So wanted to get a sense for you all as how does your current branch sales performance look relative to kind of pre-pandemic levels? Giving you really kind of three simple answers here. One answer is about 10% better. The second answer being kind of just about the same. And the third answer actually, well, we're actually performing worse than we were on a per branch basis relative to the pandemic. So hopefully you guys are getting an opportunity to get your responses in. And when Megan's ready, she can share with us the poll results. All right, so I've got about 43% saying that they are 10% better than pre-pandemic levels, about 29% saying that you are the same, and about 29% admitting or acknowledging that that their performance is a little bit worse. So I'm a little bit skeptical of the results. So if we go back to the presentation here, what we're going to see is some data from our benchmark. We have a benchmark of about 20 large and medium-sized regional institutions that provide monthly branch level sales data, actually account level sales data that we use both for benchmarking as well as for this goaling analytics that we're going to talk to you in a little bit. So what we see across the industry, or at least for across our benchmark participants, is on a per branch basis, sales are definitely down. And really what I would start the focus on is on the left-hand side, and especially that dark blue bar around checking sales. So those new to bank checking sales, that kind of new core customers into the institution that's ever so important and part of the lifeblood. What we see is those sales are definitely down. If you look on the right-hand side, you actually see that, hey, look, sales might actually be up when we're looking at kind of cross-sell or additional sales to existing customers. But if you look, most of that is in that black bar. It's really coming through lots and lots of CD sales. And if you look at that kind of core, savings account sales to existing customers, that deepening of that relationship, there's actually a negative growth over that period. Not saying it's not important in this need, kind of thirst for deposits to be selling those CDs, but I think we also have to acknowledge that some of this is not necessarily going to drive kind of customer growth and customer kind of relationship depth that we may hope for. I think the other wrinkle to think about is if we look over those 4-year period, what we see across the industry is the number of bank branches is actually down at a kind of 3% kind of annual kind of CAGR, if you will. So over that 4-year period, we've got 10% less or 10% fewer bank branches. So if we've got sales that are down by more than 10%, plus we've got our branch count, or same source sales, if you will, right? The sales on those existing branches down 10%, and we've got 10% fewer bank branches. That's a real hole to dig out of when you're trying to think about how do I grow my customer base. So what does that mean? We're going to try and figure out where we can find some kind of untapped opportunity in the network. The second thing that I wanted to share is this concept of kind of absolute performance versus kind of what I'll call opportunity normalized performance. So on the left-hand side of this chart, you've got your kind of standard, kind of rack and stack. This is for a region or a district. I'd like to acknowledge this is actually real data. So this is obviously an anonymized bank. I'm not telling you who this is or what market this is in. But this is for a group of branches in a market where you obviously see on the left-hand side a fairly wide range of performance as far as which branch is doing the most kind of sales units per month. In this case, we've just kind of clumped all of the sales into one big bucket. We have the ability, as you'll see later, to get really granular product by product. But we're essentially saying, like, what are all of the account sales per branch per month? And I'll highlight 2 branches on the left that we'll talk about in a second, kind of 1003 and 1012. So if you look at the right-hand chart, what we've done here is we've evaluated the performance relative to 2 things. 1, market opportunity, and 2, peer bank performance of branches with similar opportunity. So to describe this 2 by 2 a little bit more, on the x-axis, we have what we describe as the market opportunity. So we're going to talk in a couple of pages about how we create market opportunity. But essentially, we've bucketed all of the 20,000 bank branches in our benchmark into 10 buckets around relative market opportunity. The ones on the far right having the best market opportunity, ones on the far left having less market opportunity. And then if we think about the y-axis, up and down here, what we're seeing is the performance relative to other branches within our benchmark that have similar opportunity. And so what's really interesting here is you look over at branch 103 over there, which is a market opportunity 9, so it has relatively high opportunity to sell lots of accounts. It's performing, it looks to be right around the 60th percentile. And if you look on the left-hand side, you see branch 10,012, which is on the very low end. It's a market opportunity 1, so it has relatively low market opportunity, but it seems to be performing right about the 65th percentile. So it's performing better than your median performance for branches within our benchmark with similar opportunity. So look at that. On the right-hand side, we would actually suggest that branch 1012 is actually performing better than branch 1003. But if you look on the left-hand side, obviously on a pure absolute basis, it's branch 1003 that is performing at almost 4x or 2.5x the volume. This brings to light the importance of really understanding the context of local market opportunity when evaluating sales performance. So we're going to hit another survey question here, and so I wanted survey number 2 here. So Megan, if you could go ahead and launch the survey. What best describes your current approach for branch goal setting? Is it, and you can select multiple here. So are we looking at historical performance of the branch? Are we looking at various kind of market opportunity factors? Are we looking at banker sales capacity? We're looking at internal benchmarks, kind of internal peer groups, or kind of external peer groups, and would love to understand kind of what everyone is using. So I see the votes coming in, and I'll give it a second to get to. All right. Okay, so we'll close out the results there, and obviously we have lots of folks picking kind of multiple different answers here, but we've got about 70% using historical performance and market opportunity, about 20% using just banker sales capacity, 70% using internal kind of peer benchmarks, and about 50% using external. So I love the fact that most of you seem to be picking kind of multiple instances there, multiple answers. And so, and that aligns actually, honestly, with how we think about it. And so what we'll show you in the following pages is that we actually use what I would describe as 1, 2, and 5 primarily here around historical, using the context of historical performance combined with market opportunity and external benchmark performance. All right, so let's dive into the next section, and we're going to go a little bit deep on market opportunity. So the way we go about analyzing market opportunity is kind of 3 broad categories: market opportunity, branch specific, and then kind of what we'll call market or network position. And so the first one is, again, what probably most people are using when they're thinking about market opportunity. It's really getting into the demographics of the local market in which that branch operates, right? And so we have an inventory of over 200 metrics that we have kind of available to us in order to assess market opportunity. But what we've done is essentially run a series of regression analysis to understand by individual banking product, what are those factors that actually help influence or impact the ability for a branch to perform well in a given product category. And so we're essentially scoring that at each branch, for each product, around these market opportunity impacts. So we bring in a series of market opportunity. I like to think about the neighborhood in which I live. A bunch of, frankly, middle-aged people like myself. This is probably a great market for home equity loans for people who are paying for college education for their children. Might be a really good market for CDs for some of the slightly older cohort that live in my neighborhood, right? But honestly, just a terrible market for checking accounts. We're all pretty established in our banking behaviors and be very unlikely to switch banks or to switch our kind of primary checking account. I live in New Orleans, so I live in a part of New Orleans called Uptown, very residential. But if I contrast that, and I think about actually kind of the downtown part of New Orleans, and what we've seen there is a whole kind of urban revitalization with near to the kind of downtown business district, where there's lots of new condos being developed, much kind of younger, lots of restaurants and bars and all of that. And so there's a real influx of younger, kind of newly out of college folks there. That would be a great market for new checking accounts, right? I'm catching those consumers on an early stage of their life stage. There's a lot of movement, a lot of what we call churn, kind of people moving in, moving out. That creates opportunity for checking account probably a pretty horrible market for home equity loans, right? So thinking about and understanding the local market opportunity on a product by product basis, there's no one score for a opportunity for a given branch. What there really is different opportunity for different product classes. The other thing we bring into account is the branch-specific opportunity. So dive a little deep on this. Let's think about two branches that are sitting across the street from each other. And let's say one of them is a super regional bank that's been in that location for 20 years, has a well-established customer base, might have kind of 6,000 or more kind of consumer households associated with that branch. And across the street, you have a kind of a smaller regional bank who maybe have built that branch 5 years ago. It has about 2,000 consumer households within that branch. So if you think about what is the market opportunity, or what is the opportunity for each of those branches, especially when it comes to those products that are cross-sold, obviously the branch, even though they have the same market opportunity, they have the same demographics of the community around them, those two branches have embedded customer bases that are very different. And so when you're thinking about products that are more typically sold to existing customers or cross-sell, if you will, that one branch that's got 3 times as many customers is obviously going to have greater opportunity for cross-sell. So you need to bring into account different elements or attributes associated with the individual branch. And then the last thing we bring in is kind of what we think about kind of local scale. And so if you think about that same example, maybe that super regional bank branch there has 10% of the local market as far as a branch share, right? So they are in, and they're well established as a well-known brand in the marketplace, right? Relative to the smaller community or regional bank across the street who's only been in that location for 5 years and maybe only has kind of 5% market share. Obviously, there are significant differences in those two branches' ability to acquire new-to-bank customers. So that one with the stronger brand, with the larger branch share drives high levels of unaided awareness, which ultimately help drive new customer acquisition. It's going to have a significant advantage. So we want to make sure we're bringing that into account as appropriate when we're scoring for MOI. And so what we essentially do is we score each branch within our benchmark for each product on an opportunity score of kind of 1 to 10. And so we're essentially saying how, we're essentially putting 2,000 bank branches in each one of those categories of market opportunity 1 through 10 for each product area. So just to show a couple of exhibits out of the tool that we use, and this is a tool we call Distribution Analyzer that includes kind of a goaling analytics. You see actually that similar kind of 4-quadrant chart on the right, and this is obviously showing kind of at a regional level, kind of varied regional performance for a group of branches. I want to double down a little bit on the quadrant on the right to just think about the diagnostic kind of capabilities that are embedded in this tool. So the way I like to think about it, each of those 4 quadrants is a little bit different in how you think about it. Now, the good thing for this demo bank here is almost all of those regions, if you will, tend to be on the upper half, meaning they're on average, they're performing better than median performance, and are slightly to the right of the market opportunity line at 5. So they're generally kind of pretty well advantaged, right, or structurally advantaged. They have relatively higher market opportunity. So that's a pretty good view when you're looking at that. The reality is, if you were to decompose each of those regions into individual branches, right, the branches would start to spread and scatter, and you might actually have branches in each of the 4 quadrants. And this is where the diagnosis comes into play. And you can look at this. This is just showing kind of, again, aggregate sales units. But if we're thinking about this through a product lens and we're looking at the sales performance on a product basis, you really start to get into the diagnosis capabilities. And I especially like to focus on that bottom right quadrant. And let me tell you why. That bottom right quadrant is branches that have relatively high opportunity, right? They have above average opportunity, and their performance is below the average or below the median performance, right? And so this is the cohort of branches that I really recommend our clients dig into and try and diagnose what is it about that branch that is inhibiting their performance to not maximize the opportunity, right? So if you go back to the title of this webinar, which is the untapped opportunity in your network, this is the quadrant that represents the most around the untapped opportunity in your market. If you could diagnose what's going on in those branches by product category and understand how do I move them from the bottom right to the top right, that's going to give you the most lift on your overall branch network performance. Now, the branches in the lower left, they're also underperforming the average performance. The challenge there is even if I move them from the lower left to the upper left, there's not as much lift that I get because those lower opportunity branches have less kind of what I would call as headroom as far as getting high-end performance. And so the first place I would look is the bottom right. Second place I would look is the bottom left. Anything that's showing up on the top half, right, they tend to be they are generally kind of maximizing the opportunity that's available to them in that local branch. Obviously, it's great if you could get higher, but again, being above the median performance is a really good place to start. Here's just a different exhibit showing some of the same type of data where we're evaluating for each of the regions across this demo bank here, kind of the regions and then maybe the districts within them. You can see the relative performance levels. Those bars are not absolute performance, but they're performance relative to their opportunity of the branches that are underneath it. And if you look at the bottom, you actually see a chart where you're actually able to see that each of the individual branches stacked up across the network and see how they're performing. Now, generally, I would say this is a bank is performing pretty well. I see a majority of their branches are on the right side of the scale here, and that's a good thing. However, there is still some opportunity in the branches on the left-hand side, figuring out how do I figure out how do I diagnose what's going on that's leading to that lower performance relative to opportunity to kind of shift to the right. And now I'm going to take you kind of one more, and for those of you who are getting tired of hearing me talk, I'm going to transition to Steve pretty soon here, but I'm going to do one more slide here talking about how we go about the goal setting. And so the best way to visualize this is the chart on the left is that curve. And we sometimes call these the normalized performance curve, NPC curve. I think the most important thing is to think about this isn't actually a line. It's actually 2,000 little dots lined up. So we took all of the bank branches that were in opportunity cohort 9, so it's a relatively high opportunity for checking sales, and we plotted their prior year performance, and you get these kind of natural curves that occur. The higher opportunity cohorts tend to have higher curves that sit higher up, and they also tend to have more of a spread between high and low. The lower opportunity curves tend to be lower on the scale and are a little bit flatter, if you will, which gets to my point around the kind of the headroom of higher opportunity cohorts. But let's talk about 3 example branches on this curve. So let's start over on the left with branch A. So this is a branch that has relatively high opportunity for checking sales. Yet it's only performing at the 30th percentile. And so as you go into a goaling scenario, you start to think about, well, what do I want to do about this branch? And so the bank or the credit union kind of may take the position that, hey, look, I'm going to set as a minimum performance expectation that I want my branches to achieve at the 40th percentile, right? You could set that lower or higher, but I'm just using the yellow dotted line. And so the expectation is the goal that I'm going to set for branch A is right where that yellow line intersects with the blue line, which may be an increase of their performance goal from, say, their performance last year of 225, checking units per year up to 250, right? So you're using the slope of that curve and the kind of normalized expectation around where you want to set it. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to hop over to branch C. Right now, this is a branch that is super outperformed. So it performed at the 95th percentile, right? And I think that one of the challenges when you're the goal setter, and I know I used to always face this, is like I had my branches that were my horses, like they were the ones that were always producing, right? And whenever I needed to get more out of the network, the temptation was to put more of that goal onto that horse, right? So if you think about it, if I increase everybody's goal by 5%, right? 5% on 225 is only going to be a little left amount. 5% on 560 is going to be really big. I'm going to really start to stretch that branch. But if you look at the way this curve is, they're already performing at the 95th percentile relative to other branches with similar opportunity. There's definitely a risk of trying to push that up too high. And there's actually a risk of creating kind of inappropriate sales behaviors, or you have a team that's an outstanding team that becomes disenchanted because their goal is set so high that they really can't achieve it. And therefore they start to underperform and they kind of give up, right? So really being smart around where I'm setting that goal on the high end And again, one way that you could do this within the tool is saying, hey, I'm going to just set anyone above the 90th percentile. I'm actually going to adjust their goal down to the 90th percentile. I still know there's potential headroom. There's still potential that they might deliver more, and I hope they do. And I want to reward them if they do. But I also want to be reasonable about the expectation I set so that I don't create kind of inappropriate behaviors. And then branch B, which is kind of right in the middle there, it's performing at the 55th percentile. It's above the median. That's pretty good. Where I set the goal for this branch really starts to depend upon how much I'm needing from my network, right? If I need more consumer checking sales, I'm probably going to shift that branch up the curve a little bit, but I'm using the shape of the curve to set. So instead of asking a branch to sell 5% more, 10% more, the way I start to think about it is setting the goal 5 percentile points more or 10 percentile points higher, and therefore that's using the shape of that curve to actually set the expectation. And so that's how our kind of goaling analytics work. Steve's going to show a little bit more on how those scenarios get developed. But with that, I'm going to take us to another poll question.
And Andrew, maybe before we jump in and share the poll, we did have a question in the chat.
All right.
I'd like to propose if that's okay. And this individual proposed, as much as we want to talk about specifics, but as far as what is the source for housing starts? Is it new construction? And I know we have 240 metrics. So do you want to just touch on a little bit about what we use there?
That is a great question, and honestly, I'm going to draw a blank on exactly where we get the housing start data. But I can see who sent the question. Will allow you to remain anonymous, but I'll double check the source, and we'll hit you with the response email. You know, we bring in a bunch of data. We get data from, you know, kind of the government, if you will, right, on kind of the census data. We get data. Claritas is a large data provider that maybe some of you are familiar with and use. We obviously use D&B on the business side. All of what we're talking about applies just as much to branch-based small business as it does to consumer. So I think I've been using consumer as a construct, but we also do the goaling analytics for small business as well. So plus we have a number of other kind of smaller data providers in there as well. So I'll double check on the housing start. I think it may be government data, but it also may be coming through Claritas. So we'll get clarity and get a response to you on that one.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, Steve.
Well,
all right.
Yeah.
Take it.
Thanks. Let's open up the survey here, please. So what we have is we'd like to hear from you on how best you would describe the metrics you use for branch goaling, and you can select multiple options here. So do you set the units and balances by product, you know, traditional checking savings products? Do you set those units or balances by categories? So this may be total deposits, total loan volume. Do you set individual sales goals in addition to branch team goals? What do you set, or do you set for non-KPIs around non-sales activities like customer satisfaction, OSAT scores, digital engagement, hustle stats like proactive outbound calls or anything like that? I'm interested in that one. Or, you know, we don't currently set goals at all. We'll let the poll stay open for a bit and be brief.
Steve, if you click on the poll icon on the left, it will show you. I'm not seeing it on my screen either, but I can read it out.
Yeah, I am seeing some of the results here.
If you guys can't see them, 57% set for units in our balances by product, 86% set for units in our balances by category, 43% set individual goals, 57% set for non-sales KPIs, and then 0 checked we do not currently set goals.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I can see that. Can you see it now, Andrew? Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I love the fact that everyone on here actually actively sets goals. So I was wondering
Nice.
if anyone, one of the things that we had seen is a lot of banks backed off kind of two things. One, kind of with some of the focuses on sales practices across the industry, there were a number of banks that kind of pulled back from goal setting, as well as then as we went through the pandemic, there was another kind of pullback, or it's kind of a separate pullback from goaling and just, trying to get people just focused on doing the best they could to service the customers through that period. I think many have started to pivot back. So glad to see that kind of everyone is back on some kind of performance expectation. But Steve, any comments on the other end, parts of the response?
Yeah, what else jumps out to me, Andrew, is that 43% setting individual goals. I think if this was 5 years ago, that'd be 100%. Everybody's got individual checking unit goals and widget goals and attrition and acquisition goals. Seeing that number, yeah, I mean, feels about right that we still have some individuals that are setting, still have some firms that are setting those individual goals.
Yeah,
And like you, I am happy that we don't have anybody that doesn't set goals. So
there you go.
Good
I would say also about the individual goals, it's so much harder now when we have a branch staff of, 5 FTE, right? And a lot of people are, running between roles, right, trying to keep the branch operating, right? It gets harder and harder to set individual expectations because there's so much of the work is actually shared. So I'm not totally surprised that we've seen a decrease in that relative to your point, 5 or 10 years ago. It would have been much higher.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, thanks. So we can jump into the next half of our call here. We've talked a lot about the types of metrics we're going to set. Let's talk about how we go about doing that. And here at Kyrinos, we do have a very thoughtful, iterative approach to how we set these goals, making sure that they're fair and reasonable. I'll take you through kind of our process on the right-hand side here. As you know, as practitioners, there's multiple ways to set that goal at the top of the house. We can either do a top-down approach, we can have a bottoms-up approach from the branches, we could do a mixed approach. Oftentimes you're out there and you're grabbing from your treasury department, from your other sales leaders, what are the goals to push them down? Or again, like I said, maybe it's a unit goal based on the branch and we do it bottoms up. And we look at all those metrics. We'll set the goal at the top of the house and we will assign the goal based on that opportunity that we've talked about per branch. And after we do that, we have to take a step back and say, okay, we've got the top of the house goals. We've assigned them by the opportunity by the branch. What do they look like and do they align across back up to the channels for the individual products? Is everybody going to be happy as you circle back with all your stakeholders? And then we'll go back and we'll look at what are the risks associated within this allocation methodology. And as Andrew talked about, some of the tail risks we really look at on the right-hand side for the cohorts and on the left-hand side. Is there an area where perhaps we're undergoaling a branch that we need to take that into consideration? On the left-hand side, are we overgoaling an area, a branch, perhaps even a region or division that we need to really assess and we need to maybe stair-step them up, those different percentile changes to get them where they need to be and where they can match their opportunity. So we'll go through that whole process, the top of the house, the goals, the ensuring that they align back up to the firm goals, look at the risks, rerun it through the model and do it again with the team. So that way we know at the end of the day, we've set the best goals for the branch teams. And how we do that too, part of it is in the tool. So the next slide here, it's going to show you a little bit of a sample of what we can see as we compare the branch goals. For some reason, it didn't advance for me. Apologize. Ah, there we go. It takes a while to get from Andrew to California for me. So our goal model, it supports that scenario analysis. I love the sensitivity analysis that you could do. You could do it by product. What we're looking at here is an illustration of the consumer checking unit goal versus historic. This is on a market level. We could do a market level, region, division, whatever the nomenclature is by the firm. We can also look at it by branch. So again, we can go in, we can assess the tail risks on either side of those distribution curves. And we can really understand and see, are we setting up some fair and equitable goals for our network that are going to be achievable by the teams. And that's really important. And we also know that setting the goals is one thing. We know that there's a lot of different factors and different components that factor into the goals. So if we go next, we'll see those. These are these I like that, the practical implications on how we set goals, because we know that there's going to be a lot of things. It's not just a math exercise, let's say, and that's personally why I like it. It's a little bit of art and science. We know that there's some seasonality into how we distribute the goals. We know in the mortgage space, more people buy homes in the summer as they move and settle in before school starts. Maybe we know that there's other activity-based goals that we'd like to account for within the firms. Perhaps that, in my old role, we had a activity-based referral goal, and we would always do a big referral campaign in the month of April to kick off our fiscal year. So we want to adjust for that during allocations. There's also incentive adjustments, right? There's the incentive programs, and there's various strings we can pull. We can add incentives to a certain product to emphasize it. We can pull back incentives to de-emphasize those products, depending on how we're doing on plan. And that's going to adjust the allocations. Of course, there's different investment support. Think about marketing support. Think about different campaigns or promotions. I think we're all friends on the line. We know what product groups have extra dollars they can spend and juice up some of those results from an incentive standpoint. And branches get activities or trips, or they get different prizes. That always comes into play, and we think about that. We also think about that glide path for underperforming branches or underperforming areas, regions, divisions, and certain product set, where maybe we know their overall goal, but we're going to have to allocate that in increments and chunks as they go through and they build up to where we think their opportunity is. And last but certainly not least, again, one of my favorite things to do was just to calibrate and collaborate with the field leaders, right? We may have this perfect goal. The model says it's perfect, it's attainable, fits all the MOIs, we love it, we show it to them, and they're like, yeah, well, here's what's going on in that branch, right? In those four walls. And it could be either way. We recently were working with a client that was like, you know what, this branch can hit that goal. We know that individual, we just hired in a branch manager, they're a Spanish speaker, they can service their community a little bit better. And we know that they're going to hit that thing. And that's that qualitative aspect where we might not get in the data set, but working with our clients, we will work with you to understand those allocation nuances and adjust accordingly. So very practical approach to how we do this with our clients. And I think that goes really into, the next, thank you so much, Andrew, the buy-in from the teams, right? I love this. We are a white box. So this isn't a black box. This isn't a just trust me. We're going to do the numbers and spit it back out to you. It's very iterative and collaborative. We can look at the market opportunity index, and you can reverse engineer and build back where we derived your goal from. And that's extremely powerful as you're working with the branch teams. This isn't just hit this goal and that's it. They will know, and you can bring them along the entire journey. And we also look at that peer-based comparison. So that also builds the buy-in and strength of the analytics, because we know you could do this. And it's not because we're looking at internally your 300 branches, and sure, some are going to look like in your network, or maybe it's your 1,000 or even 4,000 branches. As Andrew pointed out, we look at that peer comparison across 20,000 branches in the US. And we look at it, how are you doing? Here's how your goal derived. Here's how we know you can do it. And you can hit that peer comparison and really gain that buy-in. And that just allows for better collaboration across the entire network. You know how many stakeholders you have to work with, from your product groups to your marketing groups to your risk and compliance teams with your sales practice audits and the like. Well, hey, you have this white box. You know you can hit it because of your peer comparison. And then you start to build up and you start to see the branches achieve those goals. And that just drives better collaboration across the whole entire thing. And we also know here with Curinos, we could set the perfect goal, but the goals aren't just a standalone. There's an entire ecosystem that they support. So that's the last thing that we will start to take a look at, is how do our goals help inform and drive that entire sales performance or sales management ecosystem? Because if you set your goals, but they're not on your scorecard, guess what? It's going to be very hard, because we all know what you measure, you move. And so we want to make sure on your scorecard, what you're measuring aligns to your sales goals. And we also make sure that the goals are highly tied into your staffing models, right? If we've identified the opportunity within your network, within this branch as being really a small business hub or small business opportunity, the staffing model should reflect that. You should have some business bankers there. Perhaps this is an affluent area and you need a staffing model with your financial advisors and the like. Maybe it's a high traffic area, mass market. Let's get more of those universal bankers that can do transactions and everything. So this whole ecosystem needs to work together. in order to drive that sales performance and really hit that untapped potential within the branch fields. And I know we all know this, but even as a practitioner for so long, I would say, even if these goals don't align, maybe they're cousins. Maybe you can squint and they kind of align, but we find the best practice is that there's just extreme continuity between these three areas. So with that, Andrew, I think I was excited and talked fast and moved my hands around because we're already at the poll, and we've given you a lot of information, but we want to know, given what you've seen with Andrew, given what we've talked about, will you be doing anything differently as you prepare for this goaling season coming up? And that could be from, again, selecting multiple areas, changing the products or the metrics for what you set goals for, maybe increasing those sales expectations, given the need to drive more growth. Are you going to look at changing from individual to team goals, or perhaps going back to team goals from individuals? Are you going to introduce anything new from a goaling perspective or eliminate sales goaling altogether? Will there be an opportunity to develop new analytics to support your goal setting, i.e. you're going to reach out to Steve and Andrew after this call, and we're going to set you on a beautiful path here with Kyrinos. So very interested to see the panelist response here. Starting to come in. 100%. 100% develop new analytics to support goal setting. That is very encouraging.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that not much changed the products or the metrics or the categories, right? Like we kind of like what we're measuring, but we need better analytics to support it. And we may be doing, we're going to try and squeeze more out of the network. A third of people are saying we need to get more, and a third are individual to team. So we were limited to 5 responses here. So it was unclear. I couldn't do like who's going to move from individual to team or the other way, because I was actually curious. But definitely still some interest in doing the team stuff, doing the individual stuff in addition to the team. So that's helpful. And no one looks like they're eliminating. And we know no one's introducing because everyone's already doing it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like the increase in those sales expectations, I feel like everyone's going back to the branches to untap opportunity. I'm surprised that that's not a little bit more, but yeah, good.
There you go. Well, just to have a little slide to recap, right? And again, this is an example of these normalized performance curves, and what you see just as an example of each of those is a different opportunity, right? So as you get higher opportunity, the range of performance is broader. The approach that we recommend, right, is kind of a threefold approach, right? It's one, it's acknowledging historical performance, right? You can't goal in a vacuum. The branch team has been there; they know what they've achieved historically, right? So you have to acknowledge kind of where they're starting from, but that's a starting point. It doesn't mean it's the destination, right? 2 is, how do I bring in kind of appropriate kind of local market opportunity that's tailored to the specific product category, right? I always like the example of this branch is actually an 8 market opportunity for CDs, and it's a 2 for checking. That can be okay, right? There's no such thing as one single opportunity score for a given branch. And then 3, bringing in the context of external peer performance, so you really understand kind of how high is up relative to opportunity by being able to understand that performance relative to a large peer set, right? It's helpful to know, and I know many banks do kind of cohort their branches by opportunity, but again, they typically put them into one cohort for all products, right? Not thinking about different cohorts for different products. And again, that only helps you understand how high is up relative to your own performance. Understanding how that fits into the context of the overall industry with a really broad sample of the industry is super important. So really, again, advocate for our approach, and would be happy to speak with any of you more about it. With that, we'll go to questions. So would be curious if anyone here has any questions that they wanted to tee up. We'd be happy to take them.
Andrew, as those build up, we did have another question.
Sure.
If I can probably throw it over to you, but It's about, let me just read it, I guess. I assume the banks in your benchmark are larger banks. How can I use that to set goals for my bank, which is smaller? So do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question, and I think that while I will acknowledge we've got a mix of banks, we have banks with thousands of branches, and we have banks with fewer than 100 branches, and actually we're in the process of onboarding a credit union, in fact, that has only 28 branches, right? So we do support kind of all types of clients, and what I would say is that's the beauty of the market opportunity, right? And so and if you think about those various inputs of the market opportunity, right, there's the local demographics, right, which is the same for everybody. If you're across the street from a Bank of America, you're still fighting for the same customers, right? But then let's get into the branch specific, like what's my customer or membership look like? And then what about my scale in the market? Am I the little guy in that market, which can be okay, and therefore your market opportunity score will be adjusted, right? So if you tend to be the smaller participant in a market, it's more likely that your scores will be on the left-hand side from a market opportunity perspective, but there still can be headroom available for you given where you are. So I think the most important thing is really understanding what might be available to you so then you can calibrate. And so I think that the great thing about this is though we have a lot of bank branches in our benchmark, we're not constrained by a given geography because the market opportunity allows us to evaluate a branch in Portland, Oregon against a branch in Portland, Maine, because we're really looking at the underlying factors around opportunity. And then it also allows us to work with whether a bank has a smaller number of branches or a very large number of branches the analytics can support because they go branch by branch.
Yeah, and I like that our opportunity scores by product too, right? So it's we could set you up. We're not just going to look at, oh, well, this chased us 4,000 units a day, and that's what you're going to get, right? So change it up.
Steve,
there was another.
I was going to throw one to you. One of the questions that came in was, how do you explain, and you've had to do this, right? But how do you explain how different sales goals for two different branches in the same market, right? Because I know they're always looking at each other's goals and they're trying to appreciate that. So how do you kind of use the analytics to provide an answer there?
Yeah. Well, the nice part about that is it's built into the tool. It's an area where you could see, as we said, it's a white box. So we know with our clients that currently use this process, they leverage a particular area within the tool set that'll show a branch all their market opportunity scores. And it's by branch, right? So you'll see this really nice heat map and you're able to say, and as I said in the presentation, you can really reverse engineer and show, well, here's your metric that we're using. Here's the opportunity score that you received. Here's the amount of allocation for this product that we derived from that goal. And you can do branches that are just right across the street from each other, a few miles away, and they may have those different opportunity scores in those different buckets. And you just spend some time with them, a little love and attention, and you can walk them through exactly how they derived at the goal. Then what I have found is there's this multiplication factor. As you do that with one individual, they will be that subject matter expert in their region. They'll do it with their other teams. They'll say, oh yeah, hey, look at this tool. Here's how the MOI works. Here's how they derived our goal. They can explain it to their peers. It drives that buy-in. So I think for that, it's never, the answer is never, well, look, goals are goals, hit them, don't complain, that kind of thing. It is, let's take the time, let's explain it, not just because I like it and I think it's really cool, but because it does get that buy-in from the field. And I spent my first 3 years of my career in branches, dialing for dollars, running around, doing all this stuff. And I just really appreciated when somebody took the time to tell me exactly how the goal happened. And our tool helps with that.
So another question that came in was identifying market opportunity is one thing, but how do you help identify specific opportunities within a branch area for specific products at the customer level, right? So I will acknowledge that this is not a solution to, if you will, generate kind of what I'll call lead lists, if you will. I think that there are a couple of other areas within Curanos, and obviously there are direct marketing providers, et cetera, that also have similar areas in this. We do a lot of work around what we would describe as kind of customer and prospect scoring, where we're actually for some banks we're working with data on their customer base combined with kind of appended with external data to really understand kind of wallet opportunity in order to help banks kind of target specific existing customers for outreach. And then separately on the what I would describe as the prospect scoring front, which is essentially trying to find kind of new, potential new customers or new members with a given geography. We actually just signed a partnership with MasterCard that is really focused with MasterCard and with Axiom to really focus on that kind of prospect universe, right? About the data around those various prospects that you would like to acquire to become a customer of your bank. So there are a couple of specific kind of opportunities or solutions that we have that may address some of those things, but to be fair, it is not necessarily embedded within this tool.
And the process that we take too can account for some of those strategic opportunities and lead lists. And Steve, we're going to be mailing out 4 million pieces of mail in 2 quarters. How can we factor that into goal allocation? Well, absolutely we can. But as Andrew already articulated,
excellent.
There's other tools we have. Andrew, there was another one that came in about timing. So how often do we set goals? So we know branches love when you set them every month and change them, but
yeah. I would say, across our customer base, I would say what I've seen the most is banks establishing kind of an annual expectation, right? And so I almost separate goal from expectation, right? Which is like, what do I expect this branch to deliver, right? And then depending upon how they implement this in, and also depending upon how tightly tied those goals might be to any incentive frameworks, right? Because you can have goals, you can have performance expectations that either can and don't have to all necessarily be tied to an incentive, right? You still might want to model what I might expect to get, even if I don't pay on it. I always like to make that clear because some banks are maybe doing a lot less with actually incentive-based pay. It doesn't mean it's not important to still have performance goals and to really understand what the performance expectation is. But typically, I see calculating it a year and then assigning them more on a quarterly basis, adjusting for some seasonality such that you can kind of monitor progress quarter to quarter as opposed to like one big wind up to the end of the year goal. So it's kind of set annually, adjusted for seasonality quarterly. And then I think most institutions reserve the right to change, either as the environment changes or as bank priorities change. And we obviously saw a lot of that over the last year and a half with the shifting interest rate environment, the need for many banks to accelerate their deposit capture, right? You saw kind of a lot of kind of category shifts or reprioritization or resetting of goaling through that cycle. Again, branch teams don't love when you kind of move their cheese, if you will. But I think if you do a good job of explaining the context of why things are changing intra-year, I think that it can help, and also to explaining to them kind of what you're going to do to support them, right? So if you're coming out with a big old, rate-based, money market promo that's going to help drive deposits in at the same time you're readjusting their deposit goal, you're going to help to get better buy-in for that. All right, I don't think I see any more questions. And we're coming up on the hour, so we'll try and give everyone 5 minutes between their back-to-back meetings all day and just say thank you ever so much for joining us. As Megan said, we will send out a link to the recording of this if you happen to have to step out for a moment and wanted to catch the rest of it. And again, if you have any questions, I'll leave this up on the screen for a second. Should have put it up there earlier. Oops, I look like I got a version control issue. I did not have our email addresses, but feel free to respond to Megan and the emails that you guys received on this, and look forward to talking to any of you after the fact. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.